Hey there, folks. So today I thought we would spend a little bit of time talking about a musician and a musical act that was pretty important to me growing up as a young man, just starting to get into music and finding my path through what I liked and what I didn't like. This is all back in the days when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and we're somewhere at the tail end of the 1970s or so. And I was really, really intrigued by. I remember first saw her. I believe it was on Saturday Night Live, and it was Patti Smith, and she had just released the album Horses, and which was not attributed to the Patti Smith group. It was just attributed to Patti Smith, and I'm going to focus on the group today, but it's an important part of the story. She went on Saturday Night Live. The album was produced by John Cale and from the Velvet Underground, and was her first kind of foothold in the marketplace of the music industry. She had a single. Her initial single was a song called "Piss Factory," coupled with a side of "Hey Joe." Wish I could show that single, but I don't have it, and I'd love to have a copy, but I don't. And there was something about Patti Smith, and this is kind of where I kind of wanted to go with this, was what was so fascinating to me about her was that I found myself very intrigued by her stage presence and her as a woman, as a female star. And she radiated this kind of how can I put this? She wasn't what I had kind of been taught was what a young man was supposed to be attracted to in a woman. And yet there was something very raw and sexual about her. And despite the fact that she didn't have the, cute blonde hair and pretty makeup and flowery dresses, there was something equally or more so that had me interested in learning more about Patti Smith. And I can remember at the time I'd always look through music magazines for pictures of Patti Smith, just because it was almost kind of a taboo, because she was so overtly sexual, and at the same time not having any of the characteristics that they were trying to sell to us as the things that a woman was supposed to be. And so that's kind of how the story kind of began. And so I got interested in the music. Horses was somewhat of a successful album. Certainly got Patti a lot of accolades in the music press. And just a little more background. Patti is kind of notorious in the Detroit area, and kind of knew a lot of characters from the Detroit music scene. And ultimately, she would marry Fred Sonic Smith from the MC5, and they would settle actually not too far from where I live right now. And I think she still lives fairly nearby. Just a side story, I once ran into Patti Smith at a parade, and she was just with her daughter, and this is maybe 5 or 8 years ago, and I walked by her and I recognized her, and she still had long hair, and she was wearing this dress, but her hair was gray, and she was an older woman by that time, but still a fascinating woman, looked just beautiful. And I stopped and I asked her daughter if I could say hello to her, and she said sure, and she tapped her mom on the shoulder. She turned around, she shook my hand, she gave me a hug, and a lot of people would have taken a photo, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to ruin the moment, and we exchanged a few niceties, and I had my sons with me, and we let her go back to enjoying the parade. But it was a cool moment, and I'm glad I got a chance to meet her, and she certainly didn't disappoint. But so the first album of the Patti Smith group is right here. And so this came out in 78, 76, 76. And so each one of these records, these next three records, did a little bit better. This got her a little bit more accolades, and there were some song Pissing in a River was kind of a hit, although the title kind of kept it from being really something that got on the radio, on really mainstream radio. And the other kind of cool thing is all of her sleeves were done by Robert Mapplethorpe, the photographer and artist. And there's a great story, if you want to read a book about Patti Smith, she wrote a story called Just Friends, which was about her and Robert Mapplethorpe's relationship when they both moved to New York together in the 1970s, and living in the Chelsea Motel, and just kind of their adventures as two young people finding their way. Patti wanted to be a poet, and Robert wanted to be an artist, and they had this kind of almost boyfriend and girlfriend relationship that was not sexual. And ultimately, Robert would find his way and was not interested in Patti in that way, although they appeared to the outside world as if they were a couple, and they posed that way for the world, maybe because it was easier for them to get things done. And they both kind of needed somebody. They were both lonely, and they needed each other, and in a way. And it's a really sweet book, and it has a great description of life in the early 70s, mid 70s, and then into the late 70s, of what it was like to live that kind of bohemian existence in there, and the struggles that they would go through to find food to eat and just to survive, and then to also be trying to find their way in a creative and artistic way. So this album comes out, and it's a great record, taking bits and pieces of certainly as a basis, rock music, but then adding elements of the avant-garde, adding a lot of punk and new wave influences, and all of these Patti records are brilliant and well worth investigating. They're not hard to find. I think they're starting to get, like everything else, it's starting to get more and more rare to find nice copies of them. But they're well worth investigating, and take the time for them. They're great records. There is a note I know here on this record in particular, which I always liked. At the bottom of the photograph of the band, it says, "Free Wayne Kramer." Wayne Kramer at the time was the former lead guitar player for the MC5. And like I said, Patti had all these connections to the Detroit music scene. And at the time, Wayne, after the MC5 broke up, Wayne went through some pretty tough times. And in his book, he talks about how he even got into some burglary and B&E, and he was dealing drugs and heroin and other things. And ultimately, he got busted and was incarcerated and put in jail. And I always just thought it was pretty cool that Patti put that in there as Free Wayne Kramer. And he served some time in jail, and it was not an easy thing to do. So then after this album comes out, 1978 comes along, and they're recording their next album, and Bruce Springsteen finds that he's got this, probably a lot like me, had this really intriguing fascination with this woman. She was just such a unique, intelligent, and beautiful, but not in any sort of like orthodox way, and an artist, and really kind of on the vanguard of culture and of music. And he comes to her and he wants to offer her this song, "Because the Night," which he thinks would be perfect for her to sing. And And the initial word back to Springsteen is that she's not interested. She doesn't want anything to do with his music, and they've kind of, you go back and you read some old articles, and they're a little more harsh than today. I think both Springsteen and Patti have kind of, found a nice spot with one another, and they've performed the song together before. But the initial response was that Patti was not interested in covering Springsteen's song. And then through some negotiations and this and that, she's allowed to change some lyrics and add some lyrics to the song, and really kind of make it a co-write. And Patti does finally agree to record Because the Night. Although from what I understand, and I've read in a few articles, that Springsteen was interested in a little more than just having her record a song. And Patti did make it clear that that was something that was just not going to be happening. So this becomes the biggest hit of Patti's career. She releases the album Easter. Probably her most, overtly rock and roll record, but still with aggressive and still with lots of punk and new wave overtures and a willingness, especially lyrically, to do a lot of things, experimental things. And another little known fact about Patti is that before, when she was trying to make money, she was writing lyrics for Blue Oyster Cult. And some of those early Blue Oyster Cult albums have co-writes from Patti Smith, which people don't realize. Anyway, this is her kind of big commercial success. It's a top 10 album. Because the Night explodes and becomes a big single, rightfully so. It's a great track, and Springsteen was correct. She was the right person to record the song, and the lyrical changes that she made it fit, just perfectly. But again, you can see from the album cover that Patti just great picture from Robert Mapplethorpe, and again, it's just radiating. A sexuality and a rawness to her that was unique, and she was not what commercial television and your mom and dad and the church wanted you to bring home. And because of that, probably a lot because of that, I found her absolutely intriguing as an artist and as a woman, and which was without a doubt an important part of the story. Anyway, this album comes out in 1978. It's a big hit. The band become what they had wanted to be, which was, Patti had said she wanted to become a rock star and be able to perform and use rock and roll music to project her poetry and to project her art and become a kind of performance artist. And she got this idea from going to a Rolling Stones gig and watching Mick Jagger up on stage, and it dawned on her that he was more than just a rock star or a vocalist, that he was in fact a performance artist, and that he was putting on a performance and leading the audience through the evening, and that through the power of his personality and through the power of the music. And that's where she first got the idea that she wanted to do a similar thing and use rock music as kind of a base for that. So another year goes by, and finally the Patti Smith group record their final album. It's not quite the hit that the album before it was. It doesn't have the single. Perhaps she should have gotten to know Springsteen more. Maybe it'd have dished up a second single. But they do a fantastic cover of the Byrds' "So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star," which when the first time I ever heard that song on Detroit radio was not the Byrds' version of it. It was the Patti Smith version of it. And I really thought it was her song. And I love what she does to it. I love what this band does to this song. It's amazing. They take it on definitely on that much more of a punk version. They punk up the version of "So You Want to be a rock and roll star. And I think they find something in it that was missing from the Byrds version of it. Again, great cover shot from Robert Mapplethorpe. Absolutely beautiful shot of Patti, and just a woman who was capable of such extremes in her looks and in her behavior, and her music and her talent. I don't think she gets the credit. It seems like I just don't hear people pulling her out when they talk about, kind of pre-punk and the importance of certain people, and talk about Iggy and the Stooges and how important all that was, and it was. The story goes something like, when they were touring this record, they were actually touring. The tour brought them to Detroit. The story that I heard was that there's a Coney Island, Lafayette, Coney Island in Detroit, and that the band, after their gig, went to Coney Island, and just by chance, Fred Sonic Smith from the MC5 was there and hanging out, and that the people who were around them said that it was like magic. Patti, you could tell that as soon as she saw Fred, it was like no one else was in the room, and that night they went off together to talk, and they were inseparable from that moment on, and they got married, and I believe they ultimately had children. They moved into Grosse Pointe, which is kind of a nice area, suburban Detroit area, right on the river, right on the water, and beautiful area. I've actually driven by the place that was their home. They had this very unique looking home with a winding staircase inside of it, and people still search it out, and had a really, and basically, although she did make more albums after Wave, really slowed her music career down after that. I read in interviews where Patti said that her and Fred figured out a way that they could make a living through their music that they had made, and through some other activities that they could do, and not have to be a part of what they considered kind of a sellouts in the music industry, and they didn't want to be part of that, and they wanted to pursue their art in their own way. And she released an album. She kind of did a little bit of a comeback that Fred helped her with when he got sick. Fred got cancer, he got sick, and he told Patti, it's time for us to do another record. Together, they did Power to the People, and I remember seeing him on the David Letterman show and performing that song. And then, unfortunately, sadly, Fred passed away after that. She's still out there. Patti is still doing creative things. There's a podcast that she does sometimes where she does readings and stuff, and it's really interesting. She's a fascinating woman, and deserves her place in the kind of pre-punk era, and getting music to take on a lot more of those avant-garde aspects to it, and also a rawness that would come with the New York Dolls and the Heartbreakers and the Stooges, and Patti Smith, the Patti Smith group. They were an important part of that, and shouldn't be overlooked. So these three albums are a great place to start, and I promise you will not regret. There's not very few tracks on here that don't hold up really well. Anyway, Patti Smith Group, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.